Time now for Focus, and today we're looking at changes to religious education in Morocco that were ordered by the king himself. Textbooks have been simplified, and it's hoped the reforms will help combat Islamic extremism. Morocco's government believes some 1,500 Moroccans have joined militant groups in Syria and Iraq. Sarah Doublier and Josh Vardy report.
Religious education reforms in Morocco are due to affect 7 million pupils. This college in Casablanca provides 12 to 13-year-olds with Islamic religious instruction. In weekly sessions lasting 2 hours each, students are taught the central principles of the country's state religion, Islam. Abdelkrim Ben Massoud has been teaching at this public school for over 20 years. He says newly introduced reforms, including the distribution of updated textbooks, has made his job easier.
The textbook has been reduced considerably. From 50 to 24 lessons. It's been cut in half. That's given teachers more room. They're now able to explain things better, and the pupils can learn in the best conditions. Students are a lot less tired than they were previously. We had a lot of problems before.
This allows me to understand the lessons more quickly, and I take them in better. There's less to learn, and that allows for greater understanding.
The reforms were ordered by the king and were rolled out in just 7 months. Fouad Shafiki was put in charge of redesigning the new curriculum. Passages of the Quran deemed too violent by the authorities have been put to the side.
L'éducation islamique est une discipline scolaire.
Islamic education is a scholarly pursuit. It's not the same as preaching. Preaching has its place in the mosque. There are some things in religious study that we can't yet teach to children. They have to wait. There are things which have to be considered in context that we can't teach anymore because the social and cultural context has changed. So we have to work on a pedagogic scheme that aims to teach the child the things they need at any given age.
However, not everyone has welcomed the reforms. Plans to change the name from Islamic education to religious studies were abandoned after complaints from a number of teachers.
These changes were characterized by their brutality, and there were no discussions with us, the actors and stakeholders of the changes. We don't understand why we have to change this way of teaching that goes back decades.
Beyond the controversy, teachers at the Ahmed Hamer College say they're just pleased the textbooks have been simplified.
It's simpler, clearer and more explicit than it was, in terms of the level of analysis and examples.
Of course, the Quran is not within everyone's reach. It's difficult to understand. There are parts of the lesson where the professor explains the vocabulary. He chooses key words which are normally misunderstood and explains them. With religious instruction, we can equip the learner with basic civil codes which can later be translated into his or her daily behavior.
Reforming Morocco's religious studies program is not only to teach young Moroccans common civic values, but is also aimed at combating radical interpretations of Islam.
And joining me now from George Washington University in the US is William Lawrence. Hello, thank you very much indeed for your time. So what do you make of Morocco's religious education reforms?
Well, it's not just what's gone on this year, but it's been going on for some years now. As I heard some of your setup piece, it definitely is tied to this project of countering violent extremism and goes back to the 2003 Casablanca bombings. There's a piece that involves empowering women, the murshidat, the religious leaders. It's a piece that involves reforming instruction in school. I recently met with one of the imams from Marrakesh who told me that only 1% of imams in Morocco have higher Islamic training at the PhD level. I mean, it's, and a lot of the imams don't have even a college degree. And so this is a project at the mosque, a project at the school, a project in society in general, and it's very important. Now, there have been a number of criticisms, but generally these criticisms have to do more with, whether Morocco is accomplishing politically what it needs to do, because extremism, of course, has its religious basis and also its political and social basis.
That's the thing, I was going to ask you about that, because some conservative lawmakers were opposed to these changes. What were they arguing then?
Well, there were a number that felt they hadn't been consulted. There was some rumors going around that some Jordanian texts had made in the Moroccan system. But there's others that believe that the instruction is sort of sacrosanct. It has these traditional roots in Morocco that, of course, go back to rote memorization and these sort of things. One of the aspects of the Moroccan reform which is really interesting is that they're increasingly focusing on objectives, maqasid, and thematic instruction, rather than just going verse by verse in the Quran and hadith by hadith in the traditions. And this is very important because I think the more Muslims see the greater objectives and the greater teachings of Islam is important, as opposed to just the rote instruction that they got from their grandfathers and from the traditions, the more Islam and modernity meet up together. And this is the larger project in Morocco. They want a modern kind of Moroccan Islam with regional implications that fights the Wahhabi and conservative tendencies that we see in other countries.
Now, as I mentioned before in the introduction to the report, these reforms were ordered by the king. Could you tell us a little bit about the relationship then between the monarchy and the education system, particularly religious education?
Well, this is very important, and Jocelyn Cézanne, a noted French researcher who lives in the U.S., has written on this whole project of state Islam. And that's something that can be criticized. To what degree is it Islam promulgated by the state? Is it authentic? Does it meet modern criteria? And is it simply a way of consolidating power? There's no question that Moroccans believe, for example, that the monarchy and the stable system depends in part on the power of the king and on religion being part of the rampart against instability and extremism that people fear. But there's no question also that there are Islamic traditions in Morocco that predate the current debates, that are tolerant, that are open to minorities, that are more empowering of women, and to let those get drowned out by the more extreme voices that are promoted in satellite television and in other religious texts is not good either. So this is a battle at the level of Morocco and a battle at the global level too about what Islam is.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, are these reforms specific to Morocco, or can they be easily adapted to other countries?
Well, that's a big debate, because Morocco has its Maliki interpretation of Islam, which is valid in some Arab countries and not others. If you look at, for example, the new Mohammed VI Academy, most of the foreign imams coming in for training are coming from Mali. Mali has different Islamic traditions. And so there are elements of this which are very Moroccan or very Maliki, and there are elements of this that are generalizable. But this is a big problem in general in Islam, because basically for 10 centuries until the 20th century, you couldn't say much about Islamic jurisprudence. And over the last 100 years, what they've done, they've opened up what they call the door of ijtihad, which means that people can reinterpret the texts at the institutional level and at the individual level. And this is creating kind of a Protestant Reformation in Islam, which is going to go on for years. And this Moroccan effort is just part of this.
All right. Well, we really appreciate your time and your analysis. William Lawrence, thank you very much for joining us for today's Focus.